Tim Weiner has been with me the last half an hour, and for the rest here in studio. He's going to be speaking at the downtown Minneapolis Public Library tonight at 7 p.m. You can go and listen to him. The name of the book, Legacy of Ashes, again, one of the bestseller lists, National Book Award winner, all sorts of things, and one of the most important books about the Central Intelligence Agency and its failures to have ever come out. Stay with us. More with Tim on today's 830 WCCO. So, I mean, it was just a weird time. Man. So what are you working on now?
I'm beginning a book about the Bureau.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But just
some colorful.
Just national security. No bank robbers, no white collar criminals.
Oh,
just national security.
Well, you see, what's funny is that for a bit of time when I was at the agency, I worked for the Office of Security, and we did counterintelligence and investigation work. And the title that I received was Special Agent, and I was a special agent. And the reason is because when the agency started, it was started by the FBI, and the guys who came over,
The guys who stood up the Office of Security, all Bureau.
They were all Bureau guys. And so the title of Special Agent came from
That's right.
the FBI, and we had it. And so I started out as a Special Agent.
There's an end note in the book talking about how that happened.
Yeah.
Edgar Hoover was licking his chops.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because he was going to get his guys in to look over the agency's shoulder.
Of course.
That made him very happy.
Yeah, and so, and I remember, I mean, that was part of the gig. And so, we worked with the Bureau on a couple of things, and to see the sort of animosity. But it was just a different philosophical world. Those guys were cops. We were robbers. And that was the difference. And you talk about having a compass. The problem with the agency and the problem with people who do what we do is the concept of right and wrong isn't exactly a simple one. It really isn't. I mean, because what you're saying is, I'm doing things that would be considered wrong if I did them here, but so long as I'm doing them somewhere else,
That's right.
they're considered right.
That's right.
And so the idea of black and white does not exist.
That's right.
And so what you have is this area of gray where you push all the way up to the edge of what gray is, and depending upon perspective, you are a robber. It just depends upon perspective. So how do you stay on the right side of that? You don't. That's the problem. And that's what makes it hard.
It takes extraordinary people.
Well,
to do that
all
work.
I'm saying is it's just that I think that it takes extraordinary people, but when what you're told is to do whatever is necessary, and these are people who are saying, I'll do whatever is necessary. These are some pretty wild people in the first place. Just are. And the nature of what we did, I remember we all took Myers-Briggs tests.
Mm-hmm.
And 85% of the people who were case officers, we were all ENTPs, all of us, which is a rare, weird kind of person.
Yeah.
And all of us, we were all ENTPs, and we didn't know it until they just said, by the way, in case you guys are curious how this played out, here's what you are. And that means something to shrink someplace. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem, is that you have this kind of weird group of people who are capable of doing all sorts of things so long as they think it's the right thing to do. But what happens when they're told to do certain things that they're told are the right things to do when they aren't the right things to do? Will you push up to that point, and how far do you push? And that is that gray piece that's out there that nobody understands. And I don't know who you blame for that, but it is true. 20 minutes to 3 here on the Jack Rice Show. This is today's 830 WCCO. I wish you could be in studio with me as we talk about the intelligence community, as we talk about the people who do, in some ways, an impossible job, trying to deal with some of the worst, trying to deal with gray in the world, because it isn't a black and white world. And what happens when people want it to be one, and you have to deal in that gray part that's somewhere in the middle? Well, that's also what Tim Weiner writes about, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, again, speaking tonight at the downtown Minneapolis Public Library at 7 p.m. about his book, Legacy of Ashes. Thank you very much for staying in studio with me. And I love this, by the way. I want to come back to what we were talking about. And I think back to drug dealers. I think back to a time when we were dealing with certain people in Central America and in South America. And there were a lot of concerns with Noriega, some of the others, that we were so close to these people, because we had to be, at least we felt we did at the agency, that was the only way to get the intelligence that we wanted. But the problem is that we perpetuated the very drug dealings that they did in the first place, or we helped them along in some other way by saying, well, it's for the greater good. But if we have that same philosophy there, and then we say we need to deal with figuring out what's going on in Al-Qaeda or one of these other organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah, some of the others, well, aren't we just doing the very same thing? Perpetuating, exacerbating a problem that exists because we're dealing with a greater harm potentially down the road.
It doesn't have to be that way. What the CIA is called upon to do today is the extraordinarily difficult mission of knowing the enemies of the United States. It needs capabilities that it has rarely had during its 60-year history. People there need to learn how to speak Arabic. They need to know how to work in dirty, difficult, dangerous places and to stay there for years on end. The level of self-sacrifice this takes is as great as our best military officers. The level of country knowledge, of situational awareness that it takes is equal to that of our best diplomats. The level of rat-like cunning it requires is equal or greater than that possessed by our very best foreign correspondents. And you don't grow people like this on trees. I personally believe, and I say this in the new afterword to the book, that we need to have a national intelligence academy in this country, a national intelligence university that would be every bit as great as the U.S. Military Academy, the U.S. Naval Academy. We need to train up people, not just to know the language and the history and the culture of the people in whom we're interested in, but how you keep the moral compass, the moral gyroscope that we were talking about earlier, in order to work in the world's most dirty, difficult, dangerous places and still hew to American values.
There is a group which I hesitate to even talk about within the agency, and they're called NOCs. Do you want to talk about them?
NOC stands for Non-Official Cover. In the Cold War, and even afterwards, sadly, almost all CIA officers working overseas traditionally used what's called diplomatic cover. That is, they pretended they worked for the State Department, that they worked for the American Embassy, and that they were diplomats.
I should admit right here, that's where I was when I opened up, when I left the agency. I had diplomatic cover.
Right. Well, that's not going to get you very far in Waziristan, posing as a diplomat. Okay? What you need to do to operate overseas is to pretend that you're somebody that you're not, that you're a businessman, that you're a cell phone salesman, that you're a drug dealer, that you're a weapons dealer, that you are a species of legal criminal. And how you train up to live this life, well, it takes years. Today, the CIA, 50% of its officers, both analysts and clandestine service officers, have less than 5 years' experience. They've been hired since 9/11. They are newbies. By the CIA's own standards, they are not good to go. I believe it's going to take a generation. And I also believe that the war in which we're now engaged is probably going to last as long as the Cold War. And the next president, whoever he or she might be, should consider how we are going to train up a new generation of American intelligence officers to do this now.